Hello and welcome to Yongo's MEXT Guide, or if this is not your first time here, welcome back, where I try my best to give advice on the MEXT scholarship application process based on my personal experience with doing so. So now we're looking at the first screening stage, which involves the language tests and the interview. So the stage before this, the document screening, involved the submission of the documents. And at this point, I have reason to believe that people have started to get feedback from the embassy, those that have been successfully called upon to take part in the test and or interview or and test and interview. I'll explain what I mean by that later on. So in this video, I will first start with looking at if not mixed, what? That's just to say, I understand that of the people that have maybe been following this video series or just going through the mixed application process through Embassy Track, um, not everybody will be called upon with a positive result. Some of you may not have been called upon to attend to write the test, but let that not be a source of despair for you. Do not despair. Do not feel like it's the end of the road or that it's a defining moment. It's just a setback, and life is full of such setbacks. So in consideration of people that might wish to throw their hat in the ring for another opportunity, there are still other options that you can look at. Then, of course, we're going to look at the some of the advice that I have personally to give relating to preparations that you can do for the language tests. I say tests because there will be two that you're going to write. That's mentioned in the guidelines. That point is mentioned in the guidelines of the application process, which I do recommend you constantly go back to answer a lot of the questions that you may have at each stage as you pass each stage. And then, of course, we're going to look at the possible interview questions that you might encounter and just some of the advice that I have for you regarding the interview. So that said, let's get right into the bulk of the video. So the information that I have to share in this video will be covered through this presentation that I have, starting with if not mixed, what? So in the event that you have not been called upon for the test, you can still apply for mixed via what is called an university track. So embassy track is just one way of becoming a mixed scholarship student. The other way is university track. So you can actually check the websites of the schools that you are interested in, that maybe that you highlighted in your placement preference form, and from those websites you should be able to find a part of the website that talks about the scholarships and fellowships that the university offers. And if MEXT is one of those, then you'll see some few details about embassy track, and you'll see some details about university track. So I'm not going to talk about university track in this video series or on this channel because I'm not familiar with it. So at this point, I'm just setting these options at your feet to consider if you are willing and able to try. So the other way is that once you check the websites of the schools in Japan that you're interested in, you may actually come across not just MEXT as a scholarship option, but you may come across other fellowships and scholarships offered by schools or institutions in Japan, and like JICA, the Japan International Cooperation Agency, I think, and those are also other opportunities. And you can just look up the eligibility and the requirements and the deadlines. Please do this as soon as possible so that you are not so that you don't regret anything should you be willing to put your hat in the ring for another opportunity. And then you can also try other countries, because I'm sure there are other countries that do offer scholarships, partial or full, for study. So just consider your options despite what might be a setback that you may have faced at this stage if you were not called upon. So being the weeb that I am, I'm just here to also spread some positive energy through these quotes that I came across. If there's one thing that I've learned from watching anime characters try and fail is that they get back up again. They scream, they cry, but they don't give up. They keep trying, and as long as they don't give up, and as long as you don't give up, the possibility of winning or the possibility of getting something out of it will never fall to zero. So this is just my way of encouraging those of you that might not have been successful at this initial stage of the document screening. And in case, for as the stages keep going, because the MEXT scholarship application process is quite a lengthy one, it's a test in patience, trust me. But regardless of what may come along in the upcoming stages, you're allowed to let however you feel about those results or those outcomes take their course, run their course. But as long as you keep trying, whether that means try again next year for MEXT, or try again for MEXT university track, or maybe just try to work harder at whatever it is you're doing. If you experience a setback, it's not the end of the road. You can keep going. So now we're going to, this is just look at a little summary of what steps you've gone through if you have been successfully called upon for the tests at the embassy. Specifically, a shout out to my fellow Zambians that have been called upon for the test stage at the embassy. Congratulations to you. For everybody that made an attempt at the document screening stage, or rather at the document preparation and document screening stage, that in and of itself is a win to consider, because there are so many external factors that could have come against you and prevented you. Internal and external factors could have prevented you from even having a shot at throwing your hat in the ring. But if you were able to do that much, then congratulations for doing so, because that's a win in its own right. And if you have been called upon for the test, this is now a shout out to everybody, regardless of your nationality. Congratulations to you. It is a win, something to be grateful for. However, take the win with a grain of salt and consideration of the fact that there are so many more stages for you to undergo and experience in this process. But of course, this is something that you can still be grateful for and show your gratitude by doing your very best with it. So now let's go into the information that I have to share about the tests that you will take and the interview. So I've put both of these things in the same video on account of the fact that in Zambia we were made to write the tests first on one day, and we were called upon. Those of us that were successful at that stage were called upon to do the interviews on another day the following week. However, I do have reason to believe to mention, because this is actually accurate information, that in some countries last year, depending on your embassy, you may have to write the tests and do the interview on the same day. So that's why this video will cover both of those for those that are preparing for both. So I do recommend actually that you prepare for both, but however, you consider that it is possible for you to not go through after the test, but we do hope for the best. So regarding the language proficiency tests, there will be an English test and a Japanese test. So this shouldn't be news to you, because I assume you've read the guidelines. So this is highlighted in the guidelines. So I'm just bringing it out here for the sake of moving together at each and every stage. Even if something is in the guidelines, I'm bringing it out because, this video series is about moving together in these steps and doing my best to highlight the important information that I wish to share at each stage. Okay. So for the English test, assuming that you did your undergraduate degree, because I'm assuming I'm speaking to people that are applying as master's students, so you've done your undergraduate degree, I assume you did it in English, then it will not be so difficult. I don't want to I don't think it's something to psych yourself out over, but it's not something you should take for granted. Definitely don't take it for granted, because it's most likely what will be considered the most as what will determine whether you move on to the next step, of which is the interview or not. And the reason I say this is because you will also write a Japanese test. However, you are not expected to know Japanese, but it is a very, very big advantage. And if you know, this is the time to flex. Don't hide it. Let it show. Show them what you're made of on this stage, on this avenue. In case you do know Japanese, but if you don't worry and just guess. So that's why for the English test, even if you do know English, even if you're very comfortable with its use, I highly recommend you use past papers to go through so that you are able to practice keeping time and being accurate in terms of the answers that you give, and also just getting familiar with the layout of the questions, and getting used to the idea of leaving enough time to review your work so that you are not taking anything for granted, that you know you've answered correctly here, you've done this and that. You just make sure that you once you practice more, you practice leaving enough time at the end of you answering the paper comfortably to go through comfortably each question. Also, I want to mention that both tests will be multiple choice. So for the Japanese test, I think the other thing that I can talk about that is just experience based for me was that I really grasped at straws to try and show that even though I don't know Japanese to the level of being able to take a test, I do know Japanese to the level of being able to write my name. So it was not required of us, but I did it because they didn't say we couldn't. What I'm referring to is that on the Japanese test, when filling in my name, I filled in my name in English with the English alphabet, and also filled my name in with the Japanese alphabet that I was familiar with, or comfortable, not alphabet, but rather, but Japanese characters that I was comfortable with at the time. So I used hiragana. So if you're familiar with hiragana or katakana, or even both, you can just choose one. It's just an experience based thing. And for me, it was it put me in a psychological frame of thinking that, okay, I'm going to try to do anything that I can that's within the rules to show that I at least have some small level of Japanese proficiency, even though it's not enough to pass a test successfully because I was just guessing. So I want to think that maybe I have no way of telling you this as a guarantee. So that was just like really just a gimmick on my part, to be honest. The other gimmick that I indulged in for the Japanese test was because the test itself is not even written in there are no translations, English translations. All of it is written in Japanese. It's the characters, the hiragana, the katakana, the kanji. That's what you see in the test. And so, personally, with my pencil and that they provided, because they'll provide you all the stationery you need. Even if you carry anything, it will just be, you most likely just be asked to leave those things at the entrance. In our case, that's what happened anyway. So one of the gimmicks also that I happened to use, so I'm just sharing here, is that when writing the Japanese tests, each question that I looked at least I think the first half of the paper, I happened to try to write out the hiragana that I was familiar with in pencil in Romanji. So like using the English alphabet. So like let's say if I see a character that I'm familiar with and it's written in katakana or hiragana, then in Romanji, like the letters, like if it's ka, kiku, keko, like I was writing ka on top, like just to see um if I can put a word together in that sentence. But even if I could, it didn't really amount to anything. And I'm admitting this because that's just the truth. It didn't really amount to anything because I couldn't understand the sentences anyway. But again, I'm calling it a gimmick that I used to ease my mind into thinking, at least I'm laboring to try and answer something. Okay, but even if you completely don't know Japanese, it's okay. Don't worry about gimmicks, just guess. But just make sure, the only thing I can say for sure is don't leave any blanks. Guess everything in the Japanese test. And as part of your preparations, it is a gimmick, but it might give you an edge. Learn how to write your own name in hiragana or katakana. So that's all I have to share on the test preparations. And as I mentioned already, they both will be in multiple choice. So yeah, just do your best to practice and leave no stone unturned. Okay, now we can look at the interview. So I just typed out in this presentation some points to consider in no particular order of importance. But as I go through them, I will be mentioning whether this is something that you can do for preparation's sake and whether this is something that you will do during the interview itself. But obvious, I think they'll be obvious from the points themselves as you see them. So they may be, as I've already mentioned, they may be conducted, the interview and the test may be conducted on the same day, depending on your embassy. But in Zambia, they were conducted separately as of 2022. Who knows? That might change this year. So it might not hurt to at least get in the framework of like, okay, we might do the things at the same time. But for those of you that are Zambian and have already received the call, I can guarantee that they'll also send an email with all the advice and information on the time and whatnot that you will need. And if there's anything that they might require you to carry. I do remember that for the test, we were expected to carry our original documents and um, attested copies of those original documents for verification, but they will give you all the instructions that you actually need in the emails that they'll send or in the calls that they made to you. If should you have been invited for the test. Okay, so as for the interview, we continue looking at the interview tips. So one of the first things is to reach out to former applicants for advice, for example, through social media platforms like YouTube. I'm going to put links in the description of as many videos as I can find that look relevant related to the MEXT scholarship interview stage. Um, this is because there's certain things that I could mention that maybe somebody else mentioned or talked about better, did a better job of explaining. And so I'll try to look for at least, well, I said as many as possible, but I lied, guys. I'm gonna put like one or two that I come across. They may not be even videos that I've watched myself, but it's just a way of you gathering as many possible questions as possible as you can. And then also Facebook is also a good place to go to. You can join the Facebook group, the MEXT Facebook group that I think I mentioned in a previous video. So I'll put a link to that same group, one of those groups, because I think there are about two that you could join related to MEXT or more if you just check Facebook. And in that group, then you can ask questions to fellow interviewees, former interviewees, people who have experience with the MEXT, because some of the questions that I'm about to share in this presentation are actually part of an excerpt from one of those posts that I happened to see at the time that I was preparing for my own interview. And then practice answering the questions out loud to achieve a natural sounding response. So once you've gathered as many questions as you possibly can, which was what I did, I tried to think, okay, let me gather as many questions as possible and then, compile them and start now going through each one and trying to answer them out loud. So the reason why I'm emphasizing on the out loud is because it will help you to time your responses. It will help you to take note of maybe how nervous you might be. Of course, since you'll be practicing on your own, you won't necessarily feel nervous, but knowing that you're practicing for the sake of an interview might actually trigger some nerves in you, and you'll be able to gauge how nervously you come out in terms of like some of the questions that potential questions, by the way, potential emphasis on potential questions that might be asked of you. And the practicing will just help your answers flow out more naturally, so that you don't sound like you're just copying and pasting from somewhere, or like you're struggling to come up with ideas as if you don't have answers. Because what I've experienced from some of the interviews that I've had to go through, whether it's for a job that I was interviewed for, not a job, sorry, an apprenticeship or interviews related to the same MEXT application process. You may, down the line, as you are going through the process, you may be interviewed by, let's say, a professor. What I've found with interviews is that you may know the answer to a question that you've been asked, actually. You may be very confident in the answer that you have, but it's just the fact that you're in the framework of an interview that makes you nervous, and then you don't come out so confidently or naturally. But for me, practicing out loud, take videos of yourself practicing, show them to other people, ask them what they think, people you can trust to give you constructive feedback, by the way, not just any Jim and Jack. Also practice with yourself, be your own coach, in as much as other people can guide you, be your own coach as well. Watch how you answer the questions. If you take videos of yourself, you'll be able to see your body language as well, because you can be speaking, you can be communicating well enough, but let's say your posture is bad, or you keep, maybe you move around too much, or you fidget too much, or you're taking too long to get to the point, such things. So be your own coach as well. Practice. Then go through some of your application documents, for instance, the MEXT application form, your thesis, your abstract of thesis, and also your study plan. These three, so that you can consolidate cardinal points to make when responding. So this will help you come out naturally and help you own your work, because in as much as you did honestly do your work in coming up with responses to the MEXT application form and your abstract of your thesis and your study plan, you will benefit from going through them just before the interview, I think, like days before, as you are preparing, that is. I think you'll benefit from it, so that you can internalize those ideas that were originally yours, so that you can present them in interview format, because in document format you had a chance to edit and go back to the drawing board if there was need for that. But in an interview, there's nothing like you answer a question, and then if you didn't like the answer, you say, okay, you know let me answer again. There's nothing like that. It's once off. But so you want those once off answers to be um you want to come off as well spoken as possible about those ones off answers, because after all, those are your responses. It's your work that you did. All that effort you put into making that study plan shouldn't get swallowed by nerves on the day of the interview. So going through your documents just to internalize those ideas, become comfortable with them, become comfortable also with expressing them in spoken word, would be good for you. Then consider greeting the panel in Japanese, and with a bow also for respect. The reason why I'm emphasizing on the bowing, is because when I did a short course in Japanese a couple of years ago, our teacher taught us a bit about Japanese culture and how they greet each other and speak to each other. And bowing is a very common thing. Excuse me. And it's not just in that short course where I've seen that. I've also seen that with a couple of Japanese people that I've happened to meet in my life in person, and also in anime. I do see that a lot. There's a lot of respect for other people in the form of bowing. It's kind of like how uh, we Zambian children are taught to, kneel when speaking to big people, or greet them, and bend your knee a bit when you're speaking to an older person. It's similar to that. So in consideration of their culture and how they handle formal situations and just everyday life, you can greet them in their language and bow as a sign of respect as you enter the room for your interview. So even if you don't know Japanese, I took a short course, so I knew how to greet at that point. Even if you don't know Japanese, literally today, you can just Google and find out how to. You can ask ChatGPT, or you can look at a YouTube video and just see how to greet in. Because I suppose your interview, whether it's if it's in the morning, you can learn how to greet in the morning, or if it's later in the day, it'll definitely not be in the evening. So, but the point is, you can learn even if you didn't previously have any experience with Japanese. It's possible, and I would encourage it to learn just simple greetings. And if you find that it's too daunting, or you're struggling to internalize, don't panic. Trust your gut. and know that if it's troubling you, that you might it like that it might throw you off if you try too hard to learn it. Just let it go. It's fine. They don't expect you to know Japanese. That was just something that I think you can consider based on my experience, because that is what I did. And then keep your answers concise, don't ramble. So if you feel like in this video I haven't been concise, I've been repeating myself in the name of trying to emphasize certain things, that's rambling. So don't do that. Do your very best to keep your answers concise. And I think your ability to do so will be helped by, wait for it, practicing out loud. Yeah, I said it. And I said it. That is, I said it again. So it's just because I saw a lot of value in it for my own preparations. And that's why I keep going back to it. Then also speak with calmness, confidence, and clarity, because there's likely going to be Japanese people on your interview panel, and speaking very fast in English, chances are that it might make it difficult to hear you, and anyone would struggle to hear you if you speak even in a language that they understand very fast, that you're not speaking calmly and you're not speaking confidently and you're not speaking with clarity. So again, practicing will help, I think, cultivate a spirit of calmness, confidence, and clarity. And that will help you to be concise as you answer the questions that you'll be asked. Then these last three things are pretty obvious, but they're here for the sake of clarity. Sit upright. I think this is important because it will help with your confidence. Body language is also a form of communication. You're not only going to speak to these people with your mouth, you're also going to speak to them with the way you sit, with the way you conduct yourself. And it's also just a polite and well-mannered thing to do, to sit upright in a formal setup like this. It will also, I think, help you not to sit upright but don't tense yourself up. Okay, sit upright, but don't let your shoulders be relaxed, but your posture is good. That's doable. And then be honest, because you don't want to sell yourself as what you are not. Because if you are there for the interview, then they've deemed you fit to be there. There's no need for you to overcompensate because you are been called after all. They've seen something worth they've seen potential in you as an applicant. So don't overcompensate with unnecessary gimmicks. Just answer honestly. Yeah. And then keep time. This is obvious. Don't arrive just 2 minutes before it's time to start the interview. No, arrive at least a good 10 minutes. This is good for you and this is good for them. It's good for them because it shows that you are respectful of their time. It's good for you because you are respectful of your own time, but it's also good for you because you don't want to reach 2 minutes before you are you it could make you panic. Reaching in good time will give you a chance to take the deep breath that you need. If you're like me and benefit from things like meditation, do that. Meditate a little bit, just go through the the potential big pointers that you think you can make, during your interview in response to certain questions, things that that you don't want to leave out, and take deep breaths. I know that the idea of meditating can sometimes be expressed in a corny cliche way, but I guarantee you that I think it can help. Just even if it's just taking 3 deep breaths to just calm yourself down, should you be in a nervous state, which is very possible it's very possible to, in such a situation, to be nervous, because naturally you want the best outcome to come out of it, but you're not guaranteed of that outcome. So having nerves is normal. So keeping time will help you just be there in good time, be there, and allow yourself to catch your breath before you go in for your interview. So here are some interview tips continued. This is also the first pointer here on dressing formally is also obvious. And I am going to mention that as I was preparing for my interview, I one of the things that helped me to calm myself was to tailor my own suit that I wore, excuse me, for my interview. And am I shamelessly plugging my own um, tailoring skills? Yes, I am, and I'm going to leave a link in the description box to my platform where I do post more about the things that I've been able to tailor. So I do have experience like tailoring formal wear, and I'll show some of that in the video as well. So yeah, looking, how can I put it? Dress the way you want to be addressed. So dress formally for your interview. Those were not my words originally, but they sound really good and they make a lot of sense, and I agree with them. So there they are. So also listen intently and answer what has been asked. So this one here ties back to um, practicing. The reason why I say this is because if you practice answering the questions naturally, then that leaves more room in your mind to listen rather than start thinking there and then how is the best way to answer this question. If you've practiced and reached a stage of like feeling natural, like yeah, just having a conversation with somebody and you're answering concisely and calmly and confidently, there will be more room in your mind to just pay attention to what they're asking so that you can answer what has been asked of you and not ramble. But if you go in gunpoint, the chances that your mind will be clouded with how to how to properly structure sentences as you answer, there's it may not leave so much room for listening intently to what you've been asked, and you may find yourself rambling. So that's why I thought it prudent to include listen intently. Then don't be afraid to ask politely if you haven't heard what's been said. And I think that brings us to the end of some of the tips that I have for the interview. Then we have possible interview questions. So this is an excerpt from a MEXT Facebook group post, and this person happens to have been from Pakistan. And these questions were helpful as I was preparing because I saw this post just before the interview itself. After I was told that after I was invited for the interview, I went back to the Facebook group. I saw this post and I said, this is just what I need. And now I hope this is also going to help you because I just decided to copy and paste some of those questions because a lot of them were actually asked of me, though I will mention those that were not asked of me at the time. And I will also include some questions that were not on this list that were asked during my experience during the interview that I attended. So you introduce yourself. So introducing yourself here does not mean introducing yourself like personally. You give your name, of course, and I think your age won't hurt, I guess, but you don't now start talking about personal things. You talk about professional things. For instance, where you studied, your most recent university, where you graduated, when you graduated, if you've got any work experience, um, um, a bit about maybe the courses that you took at school that are relevant to, let's say, your area of interest that you're hoping to pursue in Japan. I think that can be a powerful point because it will relate directly to some of the other questions that may come up. Also, disclaimer, chances that you may be asked different questions are there. So just, again, practicing will help you leave room for any contingency questions that you didn't plan for. Yes. So on the introduction you give professional career related achievements um and activities that you've been engaged in. If you did, like, let's say, if you've got some work experience or industrial attachments that you've done during your undergrad, you mention those here. If you've got maybe some awards that you achieved, you were given, or scholarships maybe that you got, previously. You talk about those here. Research briefly what if your research got some accolades, or if you intend to maybe publish your research or have published. Yeah, you talk about those in your introduction briefly. Then what is your area of interests? Stay on topic with your proposal. This goes back to my advice on read through your own documents. Internalize your work so that it does not come out like you don't even know what you yourself wrote. Because mind you, they have your documents. They're going to check what you wrote. And if it sounds like there's a disconnect between yourself and the things that you yourself wrote, that may make you look questionable. Okay, so don't be found wanting. Make sure that in your area of interest, if they ask you about it, you stay on track with what you wrote in your um in your documents as you are submitting them. Then how will this specific field benefit Japan and your home country? So this question is something that you've come across before, not from an interviewer, but in the documents that you yourself submitted. So go back to them again, internalize. Of course, don't aim to copy and paste. Sound natural. Then some technical questions related to the research proposal. So these just have confidence in yourself as someone who has undergone training in your field at undergrad, or in your whatever professional courses that you may have taken, or whatever training courses that you may have taken. Just lean on the confidence of your experiences, your previous experiences, to answer those questions as best you can. And then, then this is just a side note, it's not guaranteed that there will be someone, a technocrat from your field, on the interview panel. And that, I just thought I'd put that out there, but it's possible they could ask you. So by the way, especially if there are no technocrats from your field on your interview panel, then the idea of internalizing your work and knowing and understanding the technical aspects of your field is important, because the more you know about your field, the better you're able to explain it to someone who's not in your field. Don't aim so much for jargon unless you are asked about the jargon. Unless someone asks you something jargon in a techno, like they use technical terms from your field. So don't rely on jargon to sound smart. you know be as clear as possible, assuming that there's no one from your field on the panel, but that they should understand the importance of what you're saying. So you should be able to do that if you know your content very, very well. And then they may also ask you if there's a reason why your research can only be conducted in Japan. So think about this. That's why it's good that if you're here to watch this video or any other video and you're preparing, it's good to think about this. Okay, why Japan? Why Japan? And come up with honest but hard-hitting reasons. Like, okay, no, this is why. You express, you stick to your guns. They may ask, don't feel like they're asking it to challenge, like, how can I put it? Yes, maybe to challenge you, but don't shrink back. There is a reason why you want to do it in Japan, and bring that reason out with confidence. Then you also may be asked about your research papers, if you've published any. So you go back to those research papers as you prepare and you internalize, as I've said. Then what motivated you to study in Japan? Talk about it. If it's something personal, it's okay, bring it out. If it's something professional, that's okay, bring it out. For me, in my case, it happened to be in my application document. In fact, I talked about anime and origami were some of the big motivators that made me interested in Japan, but not necessarily as a study destination at that time when I was younger. And then when I grew up now, it's like, oh, actually, then it's actually close to. They also can offer me a lot in terms of my career. Okay, so if it's whatever your personal experience was in terms of the motivating factor, this doesn't have to sound academic. It just has to be personal, I think. That's what my recommendation. That's what my thoughts are anyway on that question. And then what do you like about Japan? The culture, the language, the food. You talk about those things honestly. And then are you familiar with Japanese language? You talk about your language proficiency in Japanese. Do you have any connections with a Japanese professor? You answer that question as per your situation. Then if you've got familiarity with Japanese language, you can even talk if you've done short courses. If you haven't excuse me, done some short courses as I did. You mentioned that, and you even talk about the fact that you're even certified. You have some certification, and I do want to think that if you do have certification, you included that certification in your application um, package, right? So, oh, by the way, they don't expect you to have had any connections with a Japanese professor. But let's say if you are a PhD student and you are maybe applying for MEXT after getting MEXT as a master student, maybe this is why they ask this. That's just my thought. But they don't expect you to have done so. So if the answer is no, just say no. Then this person also had some tips that they included in their Facebook post, which you will see when you go to the post on your own, or you can just see them from here. And I've already touched on them, like dressing properly, speaking clearly, not spending too much time on your intro, giving attention to your research proposal, making sure you know some Japanese greetings. And then this last point here is specific to their situation. In my case, there was nothing that I had to carry with me for the interview in the interviewing room. So this didn't really apply, and this may not apply to you. But in any case, I can guarantee that the embassy will instruct you according to what it it requires of you, and the instructions will be clear. And if they are not clear to you, then you will always be encouraged to just to reach out to them again through email or via call to ask. And then possible interview questions from my personal experience, in addition to the previous slide. So for instance, I forgot to mention that some of these questions I wasn't asked. For instance, a reason why the research could only be conducted in Japan. This wasn't asked of me, so I don't. Even though I've given some advice on it, it's basically it's coming from an assumption perspective rather than a experience perspective. But these are questions that I did experience being asked. So they asked me some positive and negative things about Japan, and on the what I like, I've already talked about examples. As for what I didn't like, I recommend you just answer this question honestly, because I think they ask this as a way of trying to see that you're ensure that you're not disillusioned about the place that you're going to, you know, to that you would like to go and study in, because the popular opinion of Japan is that, like, it's this utopian, technologically advanced, culturally inclined country. But every country in the world has its ups and downs, and not to say that there nobody knows about the downs in Japan. They're there. So I think anyway that they just want to have confidence that this you are not just looking at the positives. You're able to appreciate that, okay, there are certain things that maybe will be challenges for you, and that's okay. But you will be confident enough to approach them. You will approach them with confidence, rather. Then they also asked if I can speak a bit of Japanese, and I did even give some examples of what my short courses were able to teach me to do, like greet people, talk about my family, and tell the time. And you can demonstrate for those things for them, and I think they'll appreciate that. Then, if I will find it difficult to move to Japan, I think this is just to get a feel of whether you will struggle to live in another country or not. So you answer honestly, but I think with confidence. The point is, with your honesty should come confidence, because you don't want to jeopardize your consideration for the scholarship. Then my family's financial stability, and if there are any members with chronic illness or health issues. So they don't tell you why. They didn't tell me why they asked me this, and I'm sure they asked this, or maybe they asked this of my counterparts also. I have no way of knowing. But I think my suspicion is that they ask this not to weaponize it against you, but just for communication sake, or for the sake of them knowing. Should there be any issue further down the line that requires you returning home, they wouldn't have been caught off guard, I suppose. Yeah. Then, if I have applied for any other scholarships, they did ask me this, and I gave my answer. They might ask you, so you just answer. Then, if I will still want to return to my country, should I be granted the scholarship? So you answer honestly. In my case, I said no, even when because there were 3 Japanese embassy officials and 1 Zambian who happened to be a former MEXT scholar who was on that were on the interview panel. And the Zambian asked me if I wouldn't want to just stay in Japan because of how nice it is there for young and attractive anyway that it seems to live as a young person and all. And I stuck to my guns when he asked me this question. So stick be firm in your responses is what I would say, in case you're questioned about, okay, wouldn't you want to just live there? But if your answer is yes, you would want to live there, then I think that may open another line of questioning to say, okay, why? So you have to be prepared for that, whatever you honestly do choose to respond to such a question if it is asked of you. So that's the end of my interview tips. I think this is just a way of me signing off in a light-hearted manner, because I know that interviews, at least in my experience, can be pretty daunting and nerve-wracking. So I just wanted to sign off by saying, if they happen to ask you why you need money, don't answer like this girl. Yeah, but otherwise, I do hope that these tips and advice has been helpful for you, and I'm wishing you all the best. So for the Zambian context, I do know that you will write the tests and your numbers will be cut down to a fewer crop of people that will be invited for the interview. But regardless of what happens at the test stage, know that it was a win to get there. And if you don't get it this time, that's okay. There are other options, as was stated at the beginning of the video. And if you'd rather not go for those other options, that's okay. You pick up the pieces and keep going with whatever it is that you will be doing or are doing at this time. And for those that are able to make it past the test stage, congratulations in advance and prepare well for the interview. So I think I'll sign off with the pictures and little video clip that I did promise I would um, include at the end of this to shamelessly plug my small business. But otherwise, other than that, thank you so much for your attention so far. And I do hope to see you on the other side of the first screening stage. You've been watching Yongo's MEXT Guide. Until next time.